Hello, everyone. Welcome back to episode 2 of Inception Point. If you're new to the channel, my name is Kunal Threya. This is Inception Point. Today we have our guest, Carson Hess. Me and Carson met way back in high school, back in 2009. I went to South Brunswick High School in New Jersey, but it has been a while. Carson, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Man, South Brunswick High School, good times. It's like very long ago.
Yes.
um, yeah, no, it's great to be on, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners. And hopefully that there's something of value that the people listening can take away. My life's kind of been all over the board as far as the experiences that I've had, despite the fact that I'm 25. I've
Yeah.
done things in real estate, I've done things in engineering, done things in construction. And I think that there are some interesting principles that weave in and out of all of those things. But from a high level, worked in construction for a little bit after I got my engineering degree from Rutgers. Had always kind of been involved in real estate, always knew that I wanted to be a full-time entrepreneur in some capacity in the real estate space. And, just recently co-founded a startup called Development AI, where we focus on software for real estate developers and solving some pretty niche problems in the real estate development space. But obviously get into a lot more detail about that kind of down the road. But from a high level, that's what my
Got
background.
it. Yeah, no. So you went to Rutgers. How Rutgers? Why Rutgers? Why engineering? Let me start.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, when I was in high school, I always thought that I wanted to be a doctor.
Sure.
I went kind of the pre-med route even back in high school. I always wanted to take biology classes and chemistry classes and science. And I think around my junior year of high school, a couple of things happened. Number one was I started taking physics classes. That was the first time I was kind of exposed to physics and the mathematical modeling of how the world worked. And then the second thing was that in anticipation of going the medical route, I started riding in ambulances on behalf of Kendall Park First Aid and Rescue Squad.
Sure.
And I think that after a couple of rides, I just kind of realized that it wasn't really what I wanted to do. And so God bless people that do it, because it was definitely not for me.
Got it.
And I
Yeah.
think that, from that perspective, I was like, I still want to do something medical, but I don't necessarily want to go the hard, medical route with biology and all that sort of thing. So I was leaning towards biomedical engineering at the time. And in that time between junior and senior year, I was really intent on going to TCNJ to go to their biomedical engineering program,
Mm-hmm.
and applied early action, didn't get in, or rather I got deferred, and actually just applied to Rutgers. And, a week later I was admitted to the School of Engineering there. And so my intent was to go biomedical engineering. Um, and then, freshman year, and I definitely want to come back to this, but, freshman year in Rutgers engineering, and a lot of engineering curriculums around the country, they don't necessarily make you pick a major, and you don't really start the major classes until your second year. So the first year is really just kind of an exposure to the general engineering principles that'll help, and that you'll build on as you pursue the curriculum and get further in. Um, and I ended up transferring into mechanical uh, after first semester of my sophomore year.
Okay.
And yeah, so from a high level, yeah, that's why engineering. Just trying to understand how the world worked.
No, I can relate to that because in high school I was all over the place. I actually somewhat similar. I was actually taking a lot of bio and a lot of chemistry, science-based courses. So I actually wanted to go into initially. I wanted actually going even further back. I was always interested in astronomy and like cosmology and stuff. But what
Yeah.
happened was I was like I was obsessed. I still am. I watched the document. I watched Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson, one of my favorite documentaries of all time. I watch all these things quite frequently. But what happened was I realized I was not really the greatest at calc, and I did not have the aptitude for it. And when I realized that the deeper I started getting into astronomy and those subjects, I realized that it's pretty much all calc, and
Yeah.
it's a lot less of other stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, I don't know if this is the right route for me to take.
Yeah.
So I started taking more science courses, took bio 2, chem 2, et cetera, et cetera. I was like, you know what, maybe biochem research transition. I'm like, okay, well, I was actually going to go that route until I realized that my dad started making me read a lot of magazines such as Foreign Affairs, The Economist, Political Science Quarterly, and I was like, wait, you know what? I really love international relations, foreign policy. So
Yeah.
switched around again. Wanted to do that up until my senior year of high school. I met a family friend of mine who lived down in DC. He was working as a director at the World Bank.
Yeah.
Now, upon talking to him, he kind of explained to me, he's like, well, listen, I love the fact that you want to do that, but I want you to keep one thing in mind. If you come to the interview tomorrow and I ask you, what do you bring to the table? And you say international relations, foreign policy, I'm gonna turn around and say yes. So is everyone. So is everyone else in that the interview, the waiting room. What do
Yeah.
you bring to the table? So then
For
I
sure.
kind of went back and started thinking, wait a minute, that's a solid question, which I myself hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
So I turned around, I started majoring in economics, saying I can take that anywhere. Started with econ, then I added finance later on. Kind of started going, and my parents have a saying: man proposes, God disposes." So what happens there is some higher power, which
Yeah.
I took decisions that I thought I wanted to do and things that I wanted to,
Yeah.
but I guess life had something else planned. So one
Yeah.
thing led to another. Then in 2018, I got introduced to a professor who, upon talking to me, decided to say, why don't you take a look at the subject of labor and employment relations? I actually happen to like it. So did that, finish on my master's in that right now. So I get exactly what you're saying, where like you wanted to do one thing, you decided to change it, and you kind of
Yeah.
ended up at
And
Rutgers
mechanical.
Engineering.
Yeah. Yeah. And along those same sort of lines, with things changing, when you're a first semester or second semester sophomore in college, you still really have no idea what it is that you actually want to do.
For sure.
And that's actually what factored into my decision to switch majors, was that I kind of looked around the job field for biomedical engineering and then the job field for mechanical engineering. And I
Yeah.
thought to myself, if medicine and the medical field is something that I still want to pursue, I can still get that job with a mechanical engineering degree. But if I have a mechanical engineering degree, I'm not just pigeonholed into BME jobs the same way that I'd be, and BME is just shorthand for biomedical engineering for
Mm-hmm.
anyone that doesn't know. Um, I didn't want to be pigeonholed into that if I had that major. So switching to mechanical, the main reason that I did it was I wanted to keep as many doors open as possible. And it's such a broad field. I mean, I took classes in everything from fluid mechanics to how airplanes work to energy systems, which is what I ended up concentrating in, and definitely comes into play later on when I get into my construction work. But yeah, I definitely resonate a lot with what your parents are saying about man plans and God disposes. That's definitely right, because
Yeah,
anytime you
it's
come up with a plan, things always change.
things always change, and there's only so
Yeah,
much you can plan. High possibility that it may not work
right.
as much as you plan, because there's so many factors that, like, even though you can try to calculate, you just don't have enough time to calculate without
Yeah,
executing.
yep,
So you said you worked for a railroad construction company.
yeah,
Uh, how did that kind of come about? Was it through Rutgers, or was it by your own
yeah.
finding?
It's a good question. So going back to what you said earlier about, when you're talking with the World Bank people about what do you bring to the table specifically, the whole time that I was in college, and even part of high school, I was actually working delivering pizzas. And I
Mm-hmm.
worked at, one company at first, and I ended up working at two different restaurants. And I was also doing a number of other things. I was involved heavily with Engineers Without Borders starting in my junior year of college. And then by the time that I was a senior, I was actually co-leading a project for the Rutgers University chapter. And, was also working in politics a little bit, worked on the Rand Paul campaign for senator back in 2016.
Yeah.
And through those experiences, and I also worked as a real estate agent when I was summer between junior and senior year. And there was one point where I was working 4 or 5 different jobs, like on top of being a full-time mechanical engineering student,
Mm-hmm.
taking full course load because, to backtrack for a sec, when I was a freshman, I actually failed Calc 1 and almost got thrown out of school because my grades were just terrible. And it's not because I was partying or anything. It's just because I just literally did not know what I was doing.
Sure.
And it's pretty common for a lot of engineering students. And, the dropout rate among first year freshmen is just insane. It's something
Yeah.
like 20 or more percent. And just to give some perspective on that, like I came into that school with 5 friends in the School of Engineering, and every single one of them dropped out in the first couple of weeks except for me.
Yeah.
And
No, I can entirely relate to that. I went to a
yeah,
school where so for me at Drexel, they have this wild uh credit policy
yeah,
whereby on average you need about 120 credits to graduate, right?
right.
Drexel has in a 3.5 year program, 5 year program, but 3.5 years of classes. You need about 185 credits to graduate.
Okay.
And
Wow, that's a lot.
yeah, that's more than 1.5 times what you need at a regular university.
Right.
Um, what happened was Drexel is also a really big engineering school.
Right. Yeah, they
It
are.
had a really high transfer out rate. Like a
Wow.
lot of people who I knew just left. They're like, I can't do it
Yeah.
because they were averaging 18 to 20 credits a term, and a term is 10 weeks.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I entirely understand that sentiment where it
Yeah.
can get a lot and like it gets really hard really fast. So
Yeah. It's a tough adjustment, man. It's a
yeah,
very tough adjustment, and I think just high school generally, they don't really prepare you for the workload that you're going to receive in college and, obviously how to manage time and all that.
sure,
On top of just being a young person and being free for the first time,
yeah,
I think that's a lot of people in
exactly.
trouble. And then you layer on a extremely challenging curriculum like engineering on top of that. It's just kind of, adds powder to the mixture.
For sure.
Um, and so, after failing that class, really kind of turned things around academically. And, to take a full circle, the original question was, how did I get into my construction job? Through working those variety of different jobs, and through contrasting those experiences with my experiences with my engineering colleagues, I kind of realized that what I had in larger quantities that my peers did not was a certain savviness for business and also interpersonal skills, and I got to give a lot of credit to my role as being a pizza delivery driver for those personal skills because I mean, you show up to somebody's door with a pizza and you just got to like make a good impression right away, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise it's just extremely awkward, like you knock on somebody's door, they open it, and you better be ready with something. And
Sure.
I had a lot of fun doing that too. The guys that I worked with were just amazing. They were all just amazing guys that I work with, and I just have so much respect for them. These guys at Roman's Pizza on Route 27, right next to the farmers market,
Yeah.
these guys work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day on their feet. Immigrants from Mexico. They took 3 days off every year. They took off Easter, Thanksgiving, and Christmas, and that was it.
Yeah.
Every other day they were there, grinding. And just being around those guys, and also just that experience of going to people's doors all the time, and cold calling people for real estate, and cold calling people in political campaigns, and knocking on people's door for political campaigns. Really, just learn how to talk to people and like how to strike up conversation and how to network. And
Yep.
so,
That's a huge aspect, and we'll
yeah,
touch upon that later as well.
yeah. And it's so funny that you mentioned Drexel because that actually kind of is part one of how I got my construction job. So I was at a conference for the Mechanical Engineering Honor Society back in 2016. This would have been, no, it would have been February 2017. And I was getting interviewed with this company that does like automotive parts in
Sure.
just outside of Philly. And I literally like turned to my friend. I was like, I'm going to go get a job at this place. So I went up to their table, and everyone was kind of scared to talk to them because these are like high performing engineers academically.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was saying, most of them just don't have very good personal skills. And so I just walked up, and just started having a conversation with the recruiter, and it turned out really well. And I got a job offer a couple of days later. Went for a couple of interviews, and they gave me a job offer. They were giving me whatever I asked for, essentially. Around the same time, I was about to go to Colorado for spring break.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been to Colorado the summer before and just really kind of fell in love with it,
Yeah.
really wanted to get a change of pace, wanted to live somewhere different and, experience life out more of the western part of the United States. And so the whole time, between fall of my senior year and spring of my senior year, when I went on this trip, I was always trying to find a way to like get out to Colorado and just work a corporate job and make some money.
Yeah.
And so I actually ended up getting hooked up with my now former employer, but my prospective employer at the time, Balfour Beatty, through someone that I got my dad a lot of jobs in the pharmaceutical industry, basically like a headhunter that got my dad a couple of jobs. And so I went out to Colorado. I was literally in Boulder. It was like a Tuesday morning. And I literally got a call from the guy that would end up being my boss. It was like, hey, got your resume, want to see if you wanted to come down for an interview. And I did. And it was a great fit. And so, I accepted that job offer around April, and then moved out to Denver end of May 2017, like right after we graduated. It's amazing out there, just being around the mountains and The air there's amazing. The climate there's amazing. It's sunny there almost every single day.
Yeah.
It's I can't say enough good things about it. People out there are great. Definitely different from New Jersey.
Yeah. I could bet.
Yeah.
Um, Closest I was to a place like Colorado recently was about 2 years ago. I was out in I went to Nepal and Tibet.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I was in the region which is like including but also not like the surrounding areas of the Himalayas, the Himalayan mountain
Wow.
ranges.
Yeah.
So I was there for about 10 days thereabouts, and then my parents went out to Tibet. I went back to India with my
Yeah.
sister. um but dude, that place was something else. Like when you're actually like,
I
I'm
bet.
actually a nature guy too as well, but like
Yeah.
there's when you're in the mountains and there's literally nothing but you and mountains, and it's literally you and nature.
Yeah.
It's something else.
Very humbling.
Yeah, you
Very
realize
humbling.
at that point that like we're a lot smaller and than we think we are
Yeah.
in the city environment, and it is
Yeah.
like you said, 100% absolutely humbling.
Yeah. For sure. And yeah, I think it's worth going back to some of my experiences in college and how that ended up parlaying into my work in construction.
Hmm.
Most notably, the fact that I'd mentioned that I had this sort of failure academically my freshman year, and sort of turned it around and really kind of decided that I was going to pursue academic excellence and started getting involved with these extracurriculars. And I also started reading a lot. And
Sure.
I distinctly remember it was the summer of my sophomore year, between my sophomore and my junior year, that I read Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert T. Kiyosaki.
Hmm.
And that book just like completely blew my mind. And it was like a light bulb went off. And from that moment on, when I was 19 years old, I realized that I was going to be a full-time entrepreneur in some capacity in the real estate world.
Hmm.
And I had no idea what that had looked like at the time. And so that's what drove me to get in a license in New Jersey as a salesperson. And, you know, I worked that a little bit my senior year and also during the summer between junior and senior year. And just didn't really work out. I think that I sort of lacked the professional skills necessary that I would get later on in the construction world.
Sure.
But the financial hardship that I was under at the time is really what drove me to get some sort of stable corporate employment.
Got
It's
it.
because, when I moved to Denver, I had literally just a couple $100 in my pocket, enough to like get into an apartment, and that was about it. And just the opportunity to have that sort of financial security where I had a paycheck coming in every other week, was hugely uplifting to me and took a lot of pressure off me, as far as finances were concerned. And even though I was in that role and I sort of fell in love with that financial security, the whole concept of going back into real estate was always on my mind. And so, I was always trying to find ways to save money creatively, always interested in investing and trying to learn more about investing as much as I possibly could, and was really just kind of waiting to make those next sort of moves. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there because it's definitely plays a major role into the story later on.
No, for sure. And I think that first of all, that is a Rich Dad Poor Dad is a great book. I read
The
it
best.
when I was in my early 20s, but
Yeah.
no, I couldn't agree with you anymore. Like each person has their own requirements, and each person I think should at some point try to delve into um, entrepreneurship. And it's
Yeah.
interesting. I was reading another book where the author actually, I'm forgetting what the book is called. It was by a British gentleman.
Hmm.
Um, he actually explains. He's like, well, technically, everyone is an entrepreneur, right? Even if you're working for a corporation, you are an
Yeah.
entrepreneur because when you start redefining who the client is,
Yeah.
you start empowering yourself more. So
Yeah.
how he goes to explain it, even if you're working for a corporation, don't put it as you're an employee and you're working for the corporation. Each person is working for themselves. So the
Absolutely.
moment you put that, you like transition that transition to the thought
Yeah.
process, it becomes a scenario whereby you're empowering yourself by saying, no, I'm working for myself.
Yep.
I'm offering my services to the quote unquote highest bidder who happens
Yep.
to be a corporation.
Yeah.
So it can even be a teacher, for example. Like a teacher
Yep.
is going to a school district. So a teacher has expertise and they're going and offering that expertise to the school. So it's the student is not the client. In fact,
Yeah.
the school district is the client. They're giving their services to the student,
Right.
right? So that's like he puts it that way. He says the moment you start
Yeah.
looking at life that way, it gives you more control over what you want to do out of life, and makes it
For
kind of
sure.
takes away at that mentality that like I'm helpless,
Yeah.
and it gives you a little bit of more power to make decisions on your own. And I
Yeah.
think that's
No,
a huge topic where kind of like transitioning into, like you said, going into real estate because you wanted to
yeah.
get a little bit of entrepreneurial understanding and
Yeah.
exposure. So you got your license, license in New Jersey.
Yep.
Did you practice? Did you also transition that to Colorado as well, or did you kind of?
No, I actually, like I said, my experience with it wasn't really good.
Okay.
And I just really wanted to focus on my job at that point. So I let my license lapse in Jersey, and didn't consider getting one in Colorado.
Got it.
That being said, like I was mentioning before, the corporate job was really kind of always a means to an end.
Sure.
There were certain points where I really liked my job, and I thought that it was something that I could definitely do longer term. And as such, I was taking that same sort of mentality of how do I be the best that I can possibly be in whatever realm, and just transitioning that into my corporate job. So I'd be working crazy hours, and always asking a lot of questions, always trying to get into meetings where I shouldn't have been, just so that I could learn and be better at my job, because ultimately that's what was going to drive my value up and my income up. So that way I could take that money and funnel it into entrepreneurial ventures like real estate. And so about 8 months into my job in Denver, I got an offer to move out to Boston to work on a similar project. And basically, just for some context, what we were doing was essentially light rail extensions, where there were existing light rail lines that had, electrical systems powering the trains. And my responsibility was, as a systems engineer, which is basically, signaling, train control, communications, traction electrification, and then the overhead wire that you see on like New Jersey Transit, that kind of stuff. And the contract that we were working on in Denver was like the easiest project imaginable. There were no problems with access or egress. It was a pretty new authority and RTD, Regional Transportation District, and our relationship with the client was amazing. And it was kind of a smaller job. It was about $130 million, which sounds like a lot, but in the context of rail extensions, it's a pretty small job.
Yeah.
And the job in Boston was like the complete opposite.
Okay.
It was $1.1 billion. It was about 10 times as challenging from every angle imaginable, from the environmental to the civil to the fact that there was pretty much no room for us to put the tracks down and get everything that we needed in there. And the owner, or rather the client that we were working with, was extremely difficult to work with, as was the design company that we had subcontracted. We were working with the MBTA, the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, which is the 5th largest transportation authority in the United States. And the line that we were working on was also just super old and antiquated. The MBTA Green Line, hence the name Green Line Extension. It first opened up in 1897. It was literally like the first electrified rail line the first subway in the entire U.S.
Okay.
It was taking the oldest system and integrating it back in with the newest system. And so 8 months into that, so I left Denver end of January 2018, ended up in Boston in February, and essentially my role was to be the first boots on the ground systems person. And on these design build projects, you're coordinating a lot with the design team, you're coordinating a lot with the client, and you're spending a lot of time in contract documents trying to understand what it is that they're actually asking you to build. And these contracts are extremely dense. They're kind of all over the place. And our contract, I think, was over like 50,000 pages. And across the various exhibits, across everything. So there were all kinds of gotchas, and because these are just kind of recycled documents that had been shuffled through the project had been tried since like 1990s with the Big Dig in Boston, where they took Interstate 93 and put it underground. It was extremely challenging just from the wrapping your head around what the project actually was. And so here I was as a 22-year-old and just starting, 8 months of experience, responsible for essentially $130 million worth of work, representing that to people on the design side and on the client side that had, between 20 to 40 years of experience between them. And this is where like I started developing the professional skills that I didn't have as a real estate agent.
Mm-hmm.
Like how to tell somebody what they don't want to hear because you have to say it. You know, like telling the client or telling the design firm that this is how things are going to be because this is what the contract says, and not being scared to do that, you know, and not backing down from it either.
For sure.
Being able to have those sort of difficult conversations is, I think, probably one of the, and it requires a lot of emotional intelligence, undoubtedly. It's one of the hardest things and one of the skills that I think that a lot of people are lacking the most is that they're too agreeable. And I certainly had that mistake too, because when I was a real estate agent and even when I was in college, I wasn't really willing to tell people what they needed to hear in a very respectful and yet assertive way. And it was very tough, you know, the first couple of months that I was on that job. So between February 2018 and like December 2019 or December 2018, so pretty much, you know, a full year, my first year on that project, we were just getting bashed in every day verbally by the client. To the point where, you know, it was so unbelievably stressful, even just going into that environment and working 12, 15 hours a day, feeling like we were getting absolutely nothing done. And, you know, but I think that sort of, I mean, you learn from it at the end of the day.
Sure.
100%.
100%.
There were points where we would, you know, it turned into a very big, ugly contractual battle where we were getting up to like 5 letters a day from the design firm, basically legal notices saying that you guys aren't doing this and this is our contract and blah, blah, blah. And I was responsible for responding to all those. So I think I wrote probably, by the time I left the job, which I had been there for 2.5 years, by the time I left the job, I probably wrote over 200 of those letters myself. Just, I mean, it was insane.
I mean, advantages are you're probably an expert in that by now.
Yeah. It took me just a couple seconds to basically tell them to fuck off.
Did you have a supervisor or manager or mentor, not directly, but indirectly change your thought process on how to handle these things? Or was it more a direct, or was it even that you had to just figure it out by yourself?
Man, I'm actually extremely glad that you asked that question. My boss at Balfour Beatty was phenomenal in every sense of the word possible. You know, he was the guy that hired me as a college kid and coming out to Denver. And he's really the one that kind of, he didn't necessarily teach me directly, but he taught me indirectly because he was a very good role model. You know, this guy was up at 3:30 every day, in the office by 5, worked till 5 p.m. every single day. So 12 hours a day, extremely respected among the construction crews, which is a huge problem as a young person, is that you're 22 years old and you're trying to tell somebody that's been in this job for 20 something years how to do things just because you have a college degree. And so that in and of itself is like, there's a very interesting ego sort of sleight of hand that you have to manage to actually get things done in the field. And my boss actually came up as a field guy. So he was working out, you know, wiring these sort of transit systems up himself when he was like 20 something years old in Denver, and worked his way up and eventually became, I mean, literally one of the most respected guys in the entire industry. And when people spoke, he listened. And he, despite the fact that his background was very much sort of blue collar and, you know, he grew up in the trade, was extremely articulate and extremely good at managing people's emotions. And I mean, I still do look up to him a lot. And leaving that sort of mentorship was definitely hard when I eventually did it. But yeah, I mean, I can't say enough good things about the guy that I was working for. You know, he definitely taught me a lot.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. I think it was Gary Vaynerchuk said this in one of his his videos.
It's amazing.
One of the videos, I think someone asked him like, "Oh, as a young person, how do I choose what company to work for?" His response, as he always has witty responses, and he really tells it like it is. He responds saying that, like, you know, it's not where you work, who specifically you're working for and answering to. So what happens is the person you're reporting to matters a lot more than the corporation you're working for, if everything else is kind of like fair game.
Yeah.
The reason is because you're not, the corporation you're answering to is not the end all be all, because you're really it's so, in many cases it's so large that like you don't have the opportunity to interact with a lot of people and learn from a lot of people. The person you will be learning the most from is your immediate supervisor or your immediate advisor or whoever becomes your mentor. So for me, halfway through my sophomore year, just before I transferred to Rutgers, I had
Mhm.
a internship at the Indian ambassador's office to the United Nations.
Wow.
I was there for about 7 weeks, unpaid internship, grueling. Exactly like you said, like my day started at I left home at 7 a.m. I would not be
Yeah.
home till 10 p.m. every day. I was commuting
Yeah.
from New Jersey to Manhattan and then back
Wow.
every single day.
Yeah.
Fortunately, this was an internship and it was a really eye-opening experience because it really taught me to think on my feet because
Yeah.
there was only
Definitely.
like 2 interns there at that point, but there was like 4 different people who was called as the first secretary who
Yeah.
answered the ambassador. Now they can send us to any place whenever they so wanted if we weren't already in a meeting.
Yeah.
The issue is the United Nations is so large and there's so many divisions and so many umbrella organizations
Yeah.
that each first secretary is basically handling 4 to 5 different sections.
Hmm.
So what happens is the moment you're there, he can send you to any one of the four. There was around four. There were 4 people who we were directly answering to. Any one
Yeah.
of those 4 supervisors can send you to any one of the 4 to 5 sections that they have to they have to go to meetings for. So
Hmm.
there'll be 3 meetings every single hour. Now he's only one person, so he needs one person to go to another meeting to report back to him what happened, who said what, and such.
Right.
Fortunately, the person, even though any one of the 4 supervisors can call upon the interns, you were given one supervisor who's going to basically mold you through the process.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, and my dad keeps telling me this. He's like, you can work for a corporation or be an entrepreneur there as well. And
Absolutely.
that's exactly what the supervisor was. And I didn't realize it at the time. It was actually a few months later that
Yeah.
I actually understood how powerful this guy actually was. So what used to happen was this guy was he didn't it wasn't just the 4 sections that he was handling, right?
Hmm.
Which he wanted to know everything about. It was every section. One intern, 20 different sections. This guy
Yeah.
wants to know what everything, who said what in every single place, and you have to figure out a way to get there.
Yep.
This really taught us like, hey, you have to be on top of everything, and even
Yeah.
if you don't you it, even if you don't know, you have to ask questions. If you don't understand
Definitely.
it, you better ask, because
Yeah.
he can ask you about anything and say, hey, I want you to go here now, but sir, that's not my expertise.
Doesn't
That's
matter.
not an acceptable answer. He was
Yeah.
a big built intimidating guy, but the moment you got past all of that, like I remember one day I just kind of like started. He was intimidating to a level where a few of the other second secretaries who were like one level below them, so 2 levels underneath the ambassador himself.
Hmm.
Um, if you ever got a call to his office, either something really good is happening or you're getting kicked out that day.
Yeah. Yep.
So if he ever calls down like and says, "Be here," you're putting your coat on. You're headed there now.
Yeah.
Um, One day, the other intern comes back. Guy looks petrified. Like he literally Harry Potter in the Chamber of Secrets level, like
Yeah.
pale white face. Looks like he just saw a ghost. And I
Yeah.
was like, "What happened? What did he yell at you?" He goes, "No." I'm like, then why do you look petrified? He goes, "Dude, he's so intimidating." And the thing is, like, he would sit in his desk, and it was a U-shaped desk.
Yeah.
He would face the outside window because that's where his stuff was, and then he'd just like turn around, and it's like I've been waiting for you, kind of a Godfather like intimidation there.
Yeah.
But
That's
I kind
awesome.
of started laughing at him once. I'm like, "I'm sorry, sir, I can't do this." He goes, "What? What are you laughing at?" I'm like, "Sir, everyone looks petrified, but you're a really nice guy, and you can
Yeah.
teach us all a lot." He goes, "Honestly, I've been wondering the same. Like, they all look so scared to talk to me."
Yep.
After that, me and him were on amazing terms. I love the guy,
That's great. Yeah.
but this guy's work ethic was meticulous to a different level.
That's awesome.
And I didn't realize it at the time. It wasn't until June of 2015. I'd gone back for another event. This was a big event. What happened here was I was talking to somebody else, and about how I just finished interning there that past winter and such. And then he's like, "Oh yeah, who did you work for? Who's your immediate supervisor?" I was like, "Oh, it's Mr. So and so." The guy goes, "I'm sorry, he was your supervisor?" I'm like,
Hmm.
"Yeah, why?" He goes, "Do you want a job?" I'm like,
Wow.
"Just like that?" Like,
Yeah.
just like that? He goes, "Yeah."
Yeah.
I was like, "Why? I don't get it. Like, I haven't given you my resume. I haven't really discussed what I do." He goes, "I don't need it. I don't need it. The fact
Awesome.
that you were actually trained by this guy, this first secretary, like you're good, right? That's
Yeah.
all I need. If he trained you
Right.
and he gave you the A-OK, that's it. I don't need anything else. You're golden." I'm like,
Awesome.
really? I didn't know he was that. I didn't know he was like that powerful. He actually ended up becoming the consulate general of Shanghai or
Wow.
Beijing, one of the two. Right after he left, but in about a year or two of me leaving. But greatest guy ever. Guy taught me everything.
That's awesome.
But transitioning, that's kind of like it's transitioning into the entrepreneurial mindset and such. So,
Yeah.
after your railroad work, you were talking earlier back into real estate in a different capacity. Would you like to care to elaborate upon that?
Yeah. So, yeah. So when I got to Boston, I sort of carried that same attitude back from Denver of let me save as much money as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also, I think that just the confidence that I had gained through building relationships and um, working this incredibly challenging job, this incredibly challenging infrastructure project, is what gave me the confidence to actually be like, I can actually do this. I can actually make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I started going to networking events a lot more aggressively around, like, say, October 2018, or yeah, October 2018, October 2019. Um, yeah, October 2018. And all throughout the year, I had just been really aggressively networking. And through the course of that, a couple of things happened. Number one, because I mean, I lived in a living room for a year and a half in Boston because I wanted to save more money.
Sure.
Um, you know, the combination of me saving that money, the networking, allowed me by March 2019 to invest as a limited partner in a development deal in a suburb outside of Boston. And that was just strictly through the network that I had gained. So I had taken some of that money that I had saved, I'd invested into this project. And really the goal of that was just to start building my network up a little bit because, like I said, I mean, real estate is all about who you know.
Sure.
And around that same sort of time, I became very disenchanted with my life at the construction job and some of the nonprofit work that I was doing along those at that same time. And by about March 2019, when I finally made this investment, I had become pretty fed up with the fact that despite the fact that I was taking on more responsibility and getting a lot better at my job and just getting really good reviews of my job and being well respected by everyone on all sides of the fence, whether they're the client or the design team or the construction team itself, um, and realizing that my salary was never going to increase more than like 2 or 3% a year
Mm-hmm.
is what really made me realize, like, man, the amount of work that I'm putting in and the amount of stress that it's causing me on the output side of things is just so not worth it.
Sure.
It's so not worth it. Um, it was at a point where I was so stressed out that and my body would be so stiff that by 9 o'clock in the morning, every single day that I worked there from March 2019 to when I left in May 2020, I had a migraine headache every single day that I was there. My shoulders and stuff were so tight because I wasn't sleeping good. I was training a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll talk more about that later. And just the stress that my back and shoulders were so tight that there were a lot of times where I would just go to take a breath and something in my back would crack. And I just did
Sure.
not like the situation that I was in.
For sure.
And so by the time June 25th, 2019 rolled around, which is the day that I turned 24, um, I pretty much took out pen and paper and said that by the time that I turned 25, I'm going to be a full-time entrepreneur.
Sure.
I had no idea how it was going to happen, but I had made that sort of decision similarly to how when I was 19, I decided that I was going to get into real estate full-time, no matter the cost. I just decided that that's what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So from June to about October, still going very heavily into these networking events and still having no idea how this was going to shake out. And then come October 2019, I went to a meetup and it was just like any other meetup. But I was talking to this guy who was a software engineer, and he started telling me about this project he was working on for real estate developers. And I don't really remember exactly what he said that made me say what I said, but I was basically like, that is the coolest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life, and I want to try and help you however I possibly can.
Sure.
So we agreed to meet, the next night. We went to a brewery in downtown Boston and continued the conversation and trying to figure out what this sort of product would actually look like. And we had done that for a couple of months. So now we're at like maybe November, December timeframe. And if you'll recall, back in March 2019, I'd made this investment in a development project.
Mm-hmm.
And so what better person to talk to first than the developer that I invested in their project in?
Sure.
So I hit that guy up and I was like, hey, I'm working with this guy. He's doing this thing for developers. We'd love to just meet up and kind of get your thoughts. And so we met up at a coffee shop in a neighborhood just outside of Boston. And that meeting like changed the course of our lives, because as we're talking to him, we realized like we were really onto something, and we still didn't really quite know what it was. The tool looks very different now than it did back then. But the guy that we had talked to, not only was he a real estate developer, but he was a very sort of tech forward, invests a lot in the angel space. And through that conversation, like I said, we just realized we were onto something. So we met up with him again, a month later, getting to be like December, January. We're meeting up with additional developers. So through him, we sort of expanded our network of developers. I'd also known a guy that, and I guess back in September 2019, before I had gone to this meetup, I'd closed on my first house that I rent out to a couple of people. They rent out some bedrooms for me and help with the mortgage and all that sort of thing. And just the network, so I had known through that transaction, got to know an agent pretty well that was an investor himself. Mm-hmm. And that also worked as a financial modeler for a development company.
Okay.
So he was the second guy that we hit up. And he worked for a little bit larger of a company, so the traction wasn't quite the same. But we just kept sort of brainstorming, like, who is it that we can meet up with to try and run this past them? And we started going to more meetups. We got business cards, and by that time, we had settled on the name Development AI.
Got it.
And come March, I guess this was more in February, we had met with another set of real estate developers that we got introduced to through someone that we met at a meetup. And at that point, my business partner was like, all right, I'm quitting my job.
That makes sense.
And he's sort of a serial entrepreneur. He worked at a Checker, worked at GoPro back in their heydays in Silicon Valley. Very experienced software engineer, worked as a CPA as well. And just all around, like legitimately one of the best people I've ever met in my life. And so comes March, he quits his job literally the day that Trump shuts down travel to Europe, and things get real crazy with coronavirus. And all of a sudden we're like, man, did we just make some kind of mistake? Because the guys that we had been talking to that we thought had lined up to make these sorts of transactions with us and start getting some of our additional revenue, they got cold feet, and rightfully so. Developers and investors, the good ones, are very risk averse.
Sure.
And still, even now in the current climate, it's very much of an unknown of how this is going to shake out. Absolutely. Real estate so far has been kind of untouched, but that could definitely change, especially if the people stop getting the sorts of unemployment benefits they've been getting used to for the past couple of months. But flash forward, I worked a couple of additional months because I needed to save up a little bit of extra money just in case. We had enough in the bank to get us through a full year, assuming that we didn't make a single sale and that we didn't raise anything.
Yeah.
So I left my job middle of May 2020, and we're in it full time, and it's been amazing since.
It's
every possible aspect.
It's an interesting thing you brought up, how like the economy, right? An interesting time in our lives, because like both of us are in our mid-20s.
Yeah.
We've seen 2.5, I'll say 2.5 economic collapses, right? So we had now it's let's go back. The first one we'll count as half is the end of the dot-com bubble, when Y2K were like, we were just old enough to understand we can sense the stress that our parents were going through, but not really understand it entirely. That's why it kind of keeps that as half. In 2008, I was in middle school. My family's been running in IT consulting companies since 2002. So like I saw my dad go through all of that. For me, it was one more was 9/11 being a huge impact at that point, because like a lot of people started getting a little uncomfortable working with immigrants and such, especially from the
Yeah.
eastern part of the world,
Yeah.
post 9/11. So that was another huge impact for me. I was like able to understand like, okay, something is going on. I can't exactly comprehend exactly what it is. I was maybe 7 at the time.
Yeah.
So you had that. Then 2008, I was old enough to understand, okay, so something's seriously not right because my dad's running his company full time. Uh, but I can tell like business is not where it should be.
Right.
And now go where I am, I'm mature enough to really understand the nuances of what is happening.
Yeah.
Uh, it's difficult, and a lot of people really don't understand it if they haven't really started their own projects or worked on their own projects, what it actually means to like survive through a lot of these. So there's
Yeah.
two aspects that come in. uh One, there's a saying, millionaires are made during the recessions, right?
Yep.
I think that this is actually, we've crossed the 2008 capacity already as to how far the markets have nosedived.
Yeah.
um so now here's really where it gets to a point where when the going gets tough, the tough get going.
Hmm.
It's really all about planning from here on out, and the entrepreneurial spaces, especially
Yep.
how you risk averse you are, how risky you are, how much
Yep.
you are willing to leverage the opportunities you get access to at this point. But
Yeah.
it's really make or break.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought up the economic crises because I went on a bit of a rant on Instagram the other day about exactly like what you're saying,
Sure.
where we're 25 and we've already experienced two of the worst economic crises in history.
Sure.
And as a result, you see the unemployment numbers that are just staggering. And it ties back into what was my drive for becoming a full-time entrepreneur in the first place. And a lot of it was just that sort of realization that I was more or less trapped in my sort of corporate environment, and it would be very difficult to replace that sort of income. And I was unhappy, right? So like I'm talking to my boss, I'm trying to negotiate for more salary, and they're saying like, yeah, you're doing a great job, but because you only have this many of years of experience, this is the most we can pay you.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that to me was just unacceptable because, and I asked him point blank, I said, at what point does it stop being about the years of experience that I have and it starts being about the value that I bring? And he was kind of speechless when I asked him that question. And so the answer for me was never another job, right? Like that might have solved the problem temporarily, but the more endemic problem was that I wanted to be in control of my own destiny or have more control over my own destiny.
It was more of
And
a new job would have been more of a band-aid than an actual like the medicine
exactly,
to
yeah,
heal the actual underlying issue.
that's exactly it. Yeah. I mean, I'm I'm making a lot less money now as far as income is concerned, but I'm the happiest that I've ever been in my life, and there's something to be said for that for sure. But, and I get it from their side of the table because as a corporate employee, you take almost no risk at all.
Yeah.
Like as an entrepreneur, you're responsible for putting food on your own table at the end of the day. But when you're in that sort of corporate environment, the reason that you don't get compensated the way that you bring value to the table is because you don't take any risk.
Yeah.
And no risk, no reward.
Exactly. There's I think it was my dad said this at one point. Many people who've like started their own business and actually been true entrepreneurs have all said this,
Yeah.
including Gary Vee. When you're second in command, second or anything from the doorman to second in command of an organization, if the cat hits the fan, look at someone else, say, hey, okay, what do I do?
Yeah.
When you're the one when you're the captain of the ship, like there's no one else you can look to and say, what
Yeah.
do I do?
Yeah.
You kind of have to take the reins, or you have to take the wheel and say, okay, this is exactly how I'm going to do it, because
Yeah.
there is no one else to look to. Everyone's
Right.
actually looking at, in fact, on the other side, everyone's looking at you. What do I do?
Yeah.
In my program, there's a lot of people who are like, there's a lot of the program that I'm studying right now,
Mhm.
a lot of negative connotation about people who've started their own company, entrepreneurs, or high level executive positions.
Yeah.
But I say like the amount of responsibility that they have in their hands versus everybody else,
It's immense.
like just the amount. It's not about the amount of hours they'll work in a day, but the magnitude of what they're doing is actually light
Yep.
years apart.
Yep.
had days where he's taken a lesser salary because he understands that he has to put the money back into his company.
Yeah.
It's now, had he been working a corporate job, he would have been making so much more money, but
Yep.
he's trading in the free time he has, whereby he can, if he doesn't want to be at the office, he doesn't have to be at the office, but just being at the office doesn't mean you're working. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
100%. Yeah. People
there
are
are
there
days
just
when my
all
dad's
the time.
like, people will say, "Oh, you're not at the office yet? Like, we're at the office early." I'm like, "No, see."
Yep.
And one thing that he's instilled into me also is that, like, work isn't 9 to 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Work is from the moment you open your eyes in the morning to the
Yep.
moment you close your eyes at night to go to sleep.
Pretty
So
much.
it's something or another. It's a bug. And entrepreneurship is a bug which bites you,
Yeah.
and that bug is something which doesn't get turned off. It's
Yeah.
not 5 o'clock, I'm done, I'm not thinking about work anymore. It's, even though I've left the office, if I went in that day,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean I'm done, right? I'm
Exactly.
gonna be thinking, there are days where we've gone on vacation as a family, and I'm now starting to get into that position of, I'm understanding it more. I'll be at a random place having fun with friends, but business always comes first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to think, okay, so how can I leverage this conversation that I'm having with you, Carson,
Yep.
to look at a business opportunity in the future, either whether it be
Definitely.
something that I'm doing right now or something that you have, which I can then use as a collaboration to create something later on.
Yeah.
It's not a 9 to 5. It's a 24/7 job, right?
And that's why it's so important that you love what you're doing, because it's
Absolutely.
going to consume your entire life, you know? So like if you're not willing to dedicate your entire life to that sort of that mission, then it's not the right one. You know,
Absolutely. Now,
there's no, you can't put a price on happiness at the end of the day. You
a
know,
hundred
my
percent.
corporate employer could have offered me $1 million a year and I would have told them no.
But one thing we also can't really factor out though is responsibilities, but more other external factors that we as individuals may not always be able to, not be have to, I should say, not be able to, not have to go take up full time employment right now at this
Right.
time in my life. Now,
Right.
that doesn't mean that everyone else is as fortunate. Like you said, at one point you had a few $100s in your pocket, you had to take that
Yeah.
corporate job. But
Yeah.
another aspect that comes in is, it's, you can do that. So you have your corporate job paying you from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Yep.
It's not about what you do from 9 to 5. It's what you do from 6 to midnight.
Yeah.
What are you doing from 6 to midnight that you're going to take a step forward and say, okay, even though I have these responsibilities which need to be taken care of, which I need to keep this job for,
Yep.
that doesn't really stop you from doing things otherwise. So what are you going to do from
Yeah.
6 to 10, 6 to midnight?
Yeah.
That's another place. So it needn't be a 24/7. But so long as you're thinking about it 24/7,
Mhm.
Drake says when it's all working on the weekend like usual. I have that so often where even though I'm
Yeah.
like sitting on the weekend watching TV, I'm still thinking about other things that I can
Yeah.
potentially be doing and potentially be leveraging. So later on, I can then execute it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in the time between when I was 19 and I'm now 25, to get to the spot where I accomplished my original goal of becoming an entrepreneur in the real estate space in some capacity, I worked 7 days a week since I was 19, you know,
Sure.
whether it was in school, whether it was studying, whether it was doing actual work. Um, I can probably count the number of days that I actually took off and didn't do anything on less than two hands.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, you know, I obviously balanced that with taking time each day to kind of stop and do something different.
Sure.
But like you said, you know, it becomes your whole life. And I mean, I kind of glossed over the story a little bit when I was just saying like, yeah, you know, we were meeting with developers and, you know, still working my job. And then eventually we quit it. There's so much more that went into it where
Mm-hmm.
we're meeting up all the time. And I was working a job that required me to be there 10 plus hours a day. So I'd be up at 3 or 4 in the morning doing work on this thing and doing whatever needed to be done, responding to emails or whatever. Still doing a little bit of that, you know, after work, and those were some crazy days, man. And it was very stressful because you didn't know if things were going to work out, and um, you. It was also interesting because I was contrasting my construction job, which is very tech backwards and very antiquated and ruled by a lot of older people,
Mm-hmm.
with like the work that my business partner and I were doing, which was like very tech forward. Obviously it's a
Yeah.
tech company. And it was also around the same time that I read this book, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, where he talks about these differences between 0 to 1 changes and 1 to N changes,
Mm-hmm.
where essentially a 1 to N change is like you're ground pounding every day, trying to get just 1% better, and you're moving horizontally from 1 to N, as opposed to 0 to 1, which is a vertical jump, which is new technology. And that whole sort of concept really changed a lot in my life, where I was kind of going down that 1 to N path of like, let me just work as hard as I can and try to get that. Instead of getting a 3% salary increase, I'll get a 5% increase in salary. Or like, instead of, buying gas at this place, I'll go buy it at this place because it's a little bit cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
Or, those sorts of small gotchas that aren't really making a big difference in the macro,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like, and that's what burned me out, is because I was trying to go from 1 to N. And the problem with N, mathematically speaking, is that it's infinity, right?
Yeah.
It just keeps going. There is no
Absolutely.
concrete start and end point, right? Whereas 0 to 1 is very concrete. You have something, you don't have something, and then you have it. And that 1 to N is what really burned me out quite a bit, to the point where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And once you're in that sort of 1 to N and you realize you need to go 0 to 1, you really just kind of need to take a step back and detach. And it's like, what are we really doing here? Maybe we need to do something completely different, which is a pretty radical strategy and not one that I advocate, generally speaking. But if you are in a spot in your life where you are extremely burned out and you're just feel like you're doing something mundane over and over again, you have to find some way to try and break that loop.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not easy. Going from 0 to 1 is a lot harder than going from 1 to N.
No, I couldn't agree with you anymore. Actually, one interesting thing, because you did bring up, how did you deal with burnout and like, or not
Yeah.
burnout, but like more letting off the steam and
Yeah.
clearing your head while you're dealing with the burnout
Yeah.
of your day-to-day job, and like while also handling this,
Yeah.
um because everyone needs to let off steam at some point. So like different people have different things. That for me it was whether it was going to the gym or whether it was rugby or listening to music,
Yeah.
any of those variations. Well, if you had what was your way of letting off steam?
It's a great question. And just to provide a little bit more context, it wasn't even just as if just the construction job plus the startup stuff on the side wasn't enough. I was also running a nonprofit in Boston. And basically I'd taken on the president role of Engineers Without Borders, their Boston professional chapter, back in like July of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And when I inherited the chapter, and when my friend who was the vice president inherited the chapter with me, the chapter was pretty much in complete disarray. And we built it back up from the ground up and got the membership from like 4 to 20 or 30 by the time that we left. And so we were, meeting pretty constantly, pretty regularly, sending out emails, doing all the marketing. It was pretty much just us. And it was very much like a startup in some sense, because we're trying to build something back up from nothing. And so there was that going on, plus the construction job, plus the startup stuff. And there was also my training obligations with Brazilian jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and all those sorts of things, which I'd gotten into when I was in college. And really that was like the way that I let off steam, was I went and fought people. So that definitely helped.
Yeah.
That definitely helped. But even that in and of itself, because I'm very competitive with it and I actually compete in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and I think eventually I'm going to compete in mixed martial arts. That in and of itself felt like work a lot of times.
Okay.
So I felt burnt out from pretty much everything. And, I was also reading and listening to a lot of podcasts. I stopped doing that because I got burned out from those.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I had a better answer, but I kind of got burned out to the point where I'm still trying to recover from like not wanting to read or not wanting to listen to podcasts.
Sure.
And that's starting to come back a little bit, but it just kind of goes back to that 1 to N conversation. I got so sick of it that I just built up resentment towards it and didn't want to do it. Right. And like, I didn't have that sort of desire to get better like I once did, because I realized that no matter how good I got, I was only going to get a certain amount of compensation, and I didn't enjoy my job on top of it. But now that I'm sort of in my own thing with my business partner and responsible for the success of that, in my respective role, that hunger is starting to come back.
Yeah.
And so I think that the best advice that I could give with burnout is, number one, take regular time off. It doesn't have to, you don't have to be killing yourself to try and get there as fast as possible. If you work 6 days versus 7, the difference in the micro is not really going to be that much. So maybe you take like 1 day off a month instead of working 7 days a week all throughout a month.
Mm-hmm.
But also just make sure that you're doing things that you enjoy, like if you
Yeah.
enjoy hiking, then make sure that you're going hiking a lot. If you enjoy walking with your dog, then make sure that you're doing that. If you enjoy listening to music, then make sure you're scheduling time for those things every single day. Because I think that a big thing that young people struggle with, and I certainly struggle with it a lot, and I'm getting better about it now, is being patient. You
Yeah.
know, my goal when I was 19 to be a full-time entrepreneur was to get there as fast as possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, like, you get there when you're 25 versus 24, what's really the difference in the long run? You still got there,
Yeah.
and you're still hopefully going to live to be, 80, 90, 100 years old. If you think about how long college felt like at times, that was just 4 years,
Absolutely.
right? But like, we've still got 60, or, God willing, we still have 60 or more years left. That's like going to college again 15 or 16 times.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot of time.
That is.
So I
Like
think,
I
yeah,
remember freshman year of English class of in high school, buddy of mine was sitting in and we're in English, and
yeah,
I remember the guy says, "Dude, I can't wait to be done with high school." And the teacher, her Miss Roeder,
yeah,
she turns around and she's like, "Yeah, enjoy it while it lasts, because the moment you're done with high school, life
yeah,
flashes and you don't even realize how fast it goes." So I'm literally
yeah,
looking at it now. I'm like, wait a minute, like it's been 7 years since we graduated high school. Like
yeah,
it feels like it was just yesterday.
yeah,
It feels like it
for
was just yesterday. I was graduating high school, heading off to my first day of college.
yeah.
That was 7 years ago. Like I'm like, wait a
But it
minute,
also
like
feels so
this is
long ago.
actually that's it's time flies.
Yeah,
But
time's weird.
no, sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, no, time is weird. It feels long and short at the same time.
Yeah,
It does feel like it went by quick, but at the same time, it's like it was a completely different life.
yeah,
We're certainly very different than we were in high school and even when we were in college, because that was a long time ago. And um, life is something that is constantly changing, and especially so when you're committed to becoming a better version of yourself constantly. Very strange how all that stuff works.
two actually interesting things. I remember I was reading an article where Bill Gates was talking about how in his 20s he never took a day off on vacation, because he's like he was just so committed to what he was doing,
Yeah,
and he loved what he did so much that Jenny was like, I never took a. He's like, in my 20s, I never took a day of
yeah,
vacation. He was like,
that's a good
he
point.
would take time off and not go to the office, but it'd be like one day every, well, maybe one day a week.
Right.
Even then, he was still kind of like pondering upon how to improve himself and keep on learning,
Yeah,
which kind of is what I want to transition into, which is
yeah,
it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So
definitely.
it's constantly about learning new things, and kind of how have you felt as someone who started his own business? Where are you learning more or less than you did when you were in your corporate position, given the more responsibilities that you have to kind of oversee?
It's a good question. And before I get to it, going back to the concept of time and life being a marathon as opposed to a sprint,
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and again, it just kind of comes back to loving what you're doing. And it's one thing that Gary Vaynerchuk always says is love the process.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be just drilled into people's brains. It's like, if you're the sort of type A, always trying to get better sort of person, you're never going to reach any sort of destination that you're satisfied with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the always grateful, never satisfied. And you have to love being in the trenches every single day, trying to get things to be better, in order for you to actually feel fulfilled. Because, I mean, there's never going to be any sort of endpoint. Like, I think that I'm going to still be working until the day that I die, and
Sure.
on something, no matter what it is. And that's also why, um, someone can't just want to be an entrepreneur for the sake of being an entrepreneur. There has to be some sort of deeper seated reason as to why. um, they can't just be into things to make money, because that's never going to work, and
Yeah.
and you're going to build resentment towards doing that. So you have to have some sort of longer term why, and that in and of itself is also extremely difficult for people to figure out. Is like, what's the point?
No, I can agree. I actually love the point that you brought up. It
Yeah,
has to be more about more than money, because the
yeah,
money will come with it.
it will come. Yeah,
The money will come with the work that you do. But if you want to do it for money, Personally, I would say stick with your job because you're gonna make more
Yeah.
money. You're not gonna have as much responsibility and headache
Yeah.
with it. That even though
Yeah.
it looks like there's a lot of glitz and glamour, small comparatively,
Yeah.
right? That when you're looking at the people who are driving the nice, like the YouTube entrepreneurs, I'm not trying
Yeah.
to attack them and say that they're not successful. They're
Mhm.
entirely successful in their own regard, but it's more taking the least amount. Like Gary Vaynerchuk says as well. Um, However little you can take out of your company for your salary is what you should be
Yep.
taking out.
Absolutely.
Now, everything else should be reinvested for growth, for long-term gains, rather than buying the nicer car, the secondhand.
Yeah.
Now, if it's not to say you shouldn't have those things, and I think everyone
Yeah.
should aspire for having nice things, but
Yeah.
the fundamental difference is, am I willing to forego the second pair of jeans or the fifth pair of jeans or another shirt or a nicer car for the ability to maybe have something even better 5 years down the line,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's one thing. A hugely influential person in my life, even though I've never met him, is Jordan Peterson,
Okay.
and he always talks about sacrifice. And it's just like you're saying, and I think it also relates back to Rich Dad Poor Dad, where like those are just straight up liabilities buying those sorts of things.
Sure.
Because I mean, you get a brand new Ferrari, it depreciates by 30% the second that you drive it off the lot.
Exactly.
So like you're literally just throwing money down the drain when you do something like that. And that being said, it also reminds me of the quote where it's like the best things in life are free, but the second best things cost a lot of money. It's like money's good. Yeah, money's good and money's important. And I can't wait to get those sorts of nice things at some point in my life. But I also recognize that it's not going to make me happy.
Yeah.
Like I'm
Absolutely.
very happy driving my 2009 Toyota Tacoma truck. I have a lot of fun driving it. I don't need something that's very nice, and someday I'll have it. But for right now, it's just not important, and it's not necessary.
Even more than that, it's exactly like you said. It's not so much that even if you have nice things, like there are people who are blessed enough to have nice things at a very young age.
Yeah.
It's not that it's a bad thing inherently. Congratulations,
Yeah, it's great.
100% great for you. But are you? Do you have the ability? If that was taken away from you right now, would you still be happy? Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Are you
If that
happy?
answer is yes, you're 100% successful in my book. Because
Yeah.
I know people who, if those kind of luxuries are taken away, they're like, dude, I don't know how to survive. I'm like, well, sure, but I don't think that should be a necessity. I
Yeah.
think that you should enjoy those things if you have if you're blessed enough to get
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't rely on that as your source of happiness.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And to go back to your original question, you asked me about learning my current role, and I apologize for kind of going on a
Yeah.
tangent there. But like I said, the hunger is definitely starting to come back now that I'm responsible for being in my own lane as far as our business is concerned with my business partner. Um, Learning is incredibly important, and it's gotten me to where I'm at. But at the same time, and I was actually talking with my business partner about this last night, is that it's something that you literally have to schedule time for now. And the reason why is because there's always so much to do that when it gets put on the back burner, it just simply never gets done, right? Like there's
Yeah.
always something that I have to do for the business. And so what I'm going to start doing is literally blocking out time in the morning to read the same way that I did back when I was in Colorado. When I was in Colorado, I would wake up at 4 a.m. on the dot every single day and read for over an hour because I loved doing it and I loved learning. And I kind of got burnt out from it because of a variety of external factors.
Sure.
But it is such a necessity that I need to rebuild that muscle and be able to read for that amount of time, because right now I couldn't even read for an hour straight if I wanted to. My focus is not good enough to do that. And so learning is extremely important. It's going to make me better. It's going to make our business better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I need to prioritize it. So coming soon.
Absolutely. One last point.
Yeah.
Another huge point that you brought up was networking.
Oh yeah.
Your network is
Your net worth.
your network is your net worth.
Yep.
The reason that's said is because like it's as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, you don't have to get everything done, but you have to know the people who can get the job done.
Absolutely.
Now, if I don't need to be an expert in artificial intelligence, because I understand that like I need to be able to find the person. I'm actually reading a book
Yep.
right now. It's called The Way to Wealth by Brian Tracy.
Okay. Okay.
The Way to Wealth by Brian Tracy. One of
Wait a while.
the, in which he puts I think one of the first sections, he actually lists the entrepreneur as the spark plug. He's not the
Mhm.
entrepreneur is not individually doing every single task, but he's the
Yeah.
spark plug who's going out and finding an area of funding, finding a person to execute the decision,
Yeah.
finding a person to plan, finding a person to this, and then tying it all together. And then he's the spark plug who's going to light the cause the spark, which is going to push the engine forward.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
in that concept in itself, networking is the absolute key. And that is, as an entrepreneur, that is your skill set. I
Yes.
was fortunate enough that my dad started taking me to social and not so much business at that point, but like more social level networking events where you're
Hmm.
meeting people, you're understanding, and you're literally honing your craft on how to approach a person. I know many people who I'm still reluctant, where if I know the person's there, if I don't know them, I'm still going to be like, wait a minute, I don't know this. I'm going to find somebody who
Yeah.
knows that person and say, can you introduce me to this person?
Yeah.
Because if I'm able to make that connection, which I personally may not be 100% confident in myself to go walk up to like the hot shot at the party and say,
Yeah.
hey, I'm so-and-so. So if I find someone say, hey,
Right.
you know him. Do you know him? If they say yes, can you introduce me to him? Or if not, can
Yeah.
you introduce me to someone who may introduce me to him? Because
Yeah.
I know that said person is going to get the job done.
Right.
I need that introduction. So it's not me being brazen enough to go walk up to him. It's how do I if I'm not, that's okay.
Yeah.
How do I find a way to get there? That's the route that a lot of people really should start practicing. That's what networking does. So I was
Yeah.
blessed enough to get exposure to that at the age of freshman year of high school.
Yeah.
And it's not that like I was meeting people who would, and I tell everyone this, it's not something which I learned overnight. I've been doing
Definitely
this for
not.
11 years, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm at around 50% of the capacity of where I should be, of how to
Yeah.
learn how to network even better. But
Yep.
it's a work in progress, and you just keep on learning by going to more events and more events. That's the only real way you get the ability to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, it's so funny that you mentioned network being your net worth, because I literally have a meetup that I run with two of my friends that are investors in Boston
Mm-hmm.
that is called Network to Grow Your Net Worth. And the
Sure.
reason why is because of exactly what you said. And I think that, and I can definitely speak in the capacity of, having gone to a bunch of meetups where I've tried to meet people. A big reason why people are afraid to go to meetups or even talk to somebody while they're at a meetup is because, I mean, they're just afraid, right? It's someone
Yeah.
that they don't know. And I think that's where I really feel blessed to have had the experience that I've had delivering pizzas, where I'm not really scared to go up to somebody and just start talking with them.
Mm-hmm.
And to anybody that's listening that is scared to go approach people to have a conversation at something like a meetup, what you have to understand is that people are at a meetup to meet people.
Yeah.
Like they
100%.
want you to go up and talk to them. And it even relates to something as simple as like going to the grocery store and talking to the clerk, or
Yeah.
making eye contact with somebody and saying hello. It's something that Tim Ferriss says, which is go first, like it's okay to feel uncomfortable and to be nervous before you talk to people. There are certain times where I get nervous to do that, depending on who it is that I'm about to approach.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I mean, just like whatever it is, whether it's networking or just something in your life, you can't live in fear,
Sure.
because that is the sure way. We talked a lot about risk mitigation and the risk with having a corporate job versus risk with not having a corporate job. The risk with not asking for what you want in life, guaranteed that you're going to fail.
Yeah.
If
Wayne
you act out of
Gretzky, you're
fear,
going to
then you
miss
are going to
100% of
fail.
shots you don't take.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's exactly it. So yeah, I think that just in general, people, I mean, warm intros certainly help. And I think that one of the things that we have learned as a company in the last couple of months, because there was a point where we did rely on warm introductions, but you get to a certain point where it's like people just aren't really willing to do that, especially because you're essentially trying to sell to their competition.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to learn out how to do really good cold outreach. And a
Yeah.
lot of that was just like getting very personal because we sell B2B. And I was listening to a podcast with Gary Vee today where he was talking about selling B2B. And it's like, you already know who you're marketing to. Like that person at the meetup that you want to approach, you know who they are. And so you can sort of break the ice and get their attention with those sorts of personal details. Right. So like if you're going to approach somebody that you know is like an author, you say, hey, I've read your book and here's what I thought. And, start to kick off the conversation that way as one example.
100%. People are actually more anxious than you think, even the most confident looking people. And that's a huge aspect that I've realized is like, wait a minute, everyone is anxious to go up to the other person and start a
Yeah.
conversation.
Yep.
But
Go
a
first.
lot of people are just, especially living in America. I know one area I realize is interesting is like, I haven't traveled a lot, but the amount of traveling that I've done, I've actually realized that America's one place where you can honestly go up to a stranger and they're actually willing to like talk to you,
Yeah.
right? And it
For
could
the
be
most part.
it can be something as much as can you tell me the time, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who are scared to do that. Um, one other aspect, one way I was able to actually mitigate the risk of like feeling off about networking events and meetups,
Yep.
I always felt weird because like I knew that a lot of people are going to be on their guard, right?
Yeah.
If you go to those, and
Yep.
what the reason I say that is because a lot of people think that it has, if I go to a networking event, it has to be a
Yeah.
direct approach.
Yeah.
Um, it's not. This is what you don't have to go up. I took a sales class a while back, Sandler's Professional Advantage,
Yeah.
Sandler training program, in which the one thing that they told us was it's not about in sales. A lot of people think it's go direct approach and kind of get people to like, this is my product, I want you to buy it. It's like,
Yeah.
no, that's actually the worst possible way to approach sales. The best
Yeah.
way to approach it is find a find a way to identify the individual's problem. People actually don't buy products, and they're
Right.
actually not looking to buy a product for helping them improve their business.
Yeah.
People are in pain. And when I say pain, it's not a physical pain. It need to be a mental pain. It need to be a physical pain. There's some sort of pain that a person is going through.
Yeah.
So your job as a salesman or as an entrepreneur is to sell your product is
Yeah.
find what the person is hurting with and
Hmm.
find a way that you can offer them uh, a method to alleviate the pain
Yeah.
and why you're the best person to do it.
Yeah.
That will put a lot of people at a more at ease than it will putting them on their guard. So, okay, what are you trying to sell me? So a big reason
Yeah.
I bring this up is one area that I found this was 2017, around April 2017. I started working at a luxury fitness center down the street from my house.
Hmm.
And what happened was I didn't realize it at the time. I kind of just looked at it as, hey, it's an upscale gym I'm getting access to. But what I
Yeah.
actually learned through working as customer service over there was I actually had the ability to network with and like catch a lot of people off guard because
Yeah.
when they're coming to the gym, their guard isn't up that like someone's going to ask me for a job or someone's going to ask me for business. You kind of start talking to them, and then over
Yeah.
time you develop that relationship. So what I did was over a 2-year period, and I would joke around actually after a few months, hey, what's up? How's it going? Like we're to start talking to them as they're entering the gym or as they're leaving the gym, or even when I'm working out when I'm off the clock working out, go talk to the people, and you develop that relationship, and in a very passive and like low key method.
Hmm.
Then you kind of like slip in as a joke. So when are you hiring me? There's a few people I'd be like, oh, so when are you hiring me? They
Yeah.
laugh it off like, haha, yeah, whatever. I'm like, no, but seriously, when are you hiring me? Like,
Yeah.
oh wait, are you actually looking for a job? I'm like, actually, yes, I am. Right?
Yeah.
Actually, yes, I am. Are you hiring? Yeah, sure. I could put in a. I'm sometimes I'd say yes, they are, or they know somebody who
Yeah.
is, and they're like, you know what, this is actually a good guy. I've gotten to know him over X amount of time, be it a few months, be it a few years. Now, the advantage of which I've realized at this point, and is even though I don't work at that gym anymore, that gym closed down. Another gym opened up down the street, and I actually became a member of that gym. And even though I'm not using the gym as just as a gym,
Yeah.
I'm looking at it as a networking opportunity. I'm catching a lot of people who I see. Maybe they can introduce me to someone else who they've met or they were in their classes. I start to talk to them and their guard is entirely down.
Yeah.
That's the best time to catch them. So nowadays it's more business that I've been talking and like trying to see who I can look at it for clients and such. But it kind of also works in like, oh, hey, yeah, as we're talking, what can we potentially do?
Yeah.
But it's network, like it's network, going to networking meetups. It's also understanding how to do it in a very subtle way, whereby it's not a direct approach, but it's more of like you're beating around the bush to get to the point, and sometimes
Yeah.
it actually works.
The thing is with networking is, and just a couple strategies for anyone who's listening that really wants just some very simple tactics on how to network, is number one, it has to be all about the other person. You
Sure.
know, the reason that you're able to ask somebody for a job or ask for anything is because you've already sort of built that relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to make it about the other person is to do exactly that. You know, when you're into a networking event, and it's the best way to also build trust, right? Because a lot of, especially in sales, like the reason that people don't want to buy your shit is because they don't trust you. You know, it's a big part of it. You know, you're just a sleazy salesman at a certain point. And I've definitely had to battle with that in my current role as well. But just always asking the people about what they do and taking a genuine interest in it, I think is like, you're not going to be able to build a relationship if you're not genuine about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And two things can be true at once. You can be genuinely interested in somebody and you know, still ask them anything and everything about themselves. So like, where are they from? You know, what do they do currently? What are they trying to do? And then figuring out genuinely a way to help them. And the
Yeah.
most beautiful thing about that is that as you network, you actually can help them, because it turns out, you know, if they're looking for a lender or for a developer or for an agent, then because you do so much networking, because you're so good at building relationships, then it becomes very easy to connect those people. Then all of a sudden, in the eyes of that person, you're now an expert, and that helps you ask for whatever you need later on. And so that's the first thing, is ask them about themselves. The second thing is talk to everybody, because you never know where your next deal is going to come from. You never know what you're going to be able to offer this other person, and similarly what they can offer you. You can't have an ego and think like, oh, I'm not going to talk to this person because they look like they're, you know, not as savvy or as interesting as this other person. You have to talk to everybody, you know,
Yeah.
plain and simple. You never
100%.
know where that next deal is going to come from. Then the third thing is to know and use their name, and that kind of goes along with the first thing. When you're asking them about themselves, just remembering somebody's name
Mm-hmm.
has the most profound impact on that relationship when you're starting to build it up.
Yeah.
So that's the three things that I would say: is ask them, you know, make it all about them, talk to everybody, and know and actually use people's names and remember them. People always say that they're not good with names, and it's like, if you cared, you would remember somebody's name. It's really not that.
Absolutely. It's actually that's one of the points that that's brought up in How to
I
Make
wouldn't
Friends and
influence
Influence
people.
People with
Yep. Dale Carnegie.
Dale Carnegie.
Yep.
That's actually one of the big points that he writes about, is
Yeah,
actually like using someone's name. And in fact, it's even more that people like hearing their own name.
they do.
So
Yeah,
when you refer to someone, even like during a conversation, many people like say it in the beginning and then they'll never say
yeah.
the person's name after again. But
Then they forget.
in certain times, and then exactly certain
Yeah,
times, what he goes on to explain is like, use it every opportunity you get when you're referring to the person, right? Don't just be like
yeah,
you, but like, say Carson instead of just saying you. What would
yeah,
Carson? What would you like? People like hearing their name, and it kind of gives them this sense of that you're actually trying.
yeah. It tells them that you care.
Yeah. So that's a huge aspect of kind of building relationships and building upon that, which transitions into you getting potentially getting business and helping them alleviate the issues that they're facing in their
Right.
day-to-day lives or even their day-to-day business.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like where I like to look at as a good starting point of like, for many people who are listening, is start by just learning your neighbor's name,
Yeah.
right?
Great places.
As younger people, actually even one step further, what I've learned through starting this podcast is reaching out to people who I haven't talked to in a long time, because of fear that like
Yeah.
there's this weird stigma that someone who is reaching out to you from your high school or from college, who like you didn't really talk to but you met once or
Yeah.
twice, they want something out of you. It's maybe they do, maybe they don't, but I think there's a
Yeah.
certain fear of it. Like I've reached out to you, we haven't talked in We were
Long
actually
time.
talking the other day,
Yeah,
yesterday. It's like,
way too
we haven't
long.
talked in 7 years, right? Like a lot of people be on their guy, like, all right, what do you want from me? Sometimes it's
Yeah,
not really, what do I want from you? Maybe I
yeah,
just want to say hello, right?
yeah,
It's been a while, and you never know what can, exactly. You never know what deals come from what business deals or any
yeah,
deals can come from where. So
yeah,
collaborations are a huge aspect. And just to any of the guests, the one piece of advice we leave with is learn to network, keep people's names in your conversation.
yeah,
Don't be afraid to reach out to people, and
yeah,
take a bet on
literally.
yourself.
Yeah.
But if there's anything you would like to leave the audience with, because I think we're reaching a point where I'm genuinely surprised if a lot of people have stayed this far.
Yeah.
Um, few closing points as to
Yeah.
what would you leave the audience with?
Yeah. Couple things, just kind of reiterating what we said, make sure you're doing things that you love the
Mhm.
process. You can't put a price on happiness, and talk to everybody. Like you said, it's not even just we're talking to people because we want something from them. The reason that I said yes to come on your show is obviously, I mean, we're friends, obviously,
Sure.
but I take that point about talking to everybody very seriously because um, it kind of goes back to what our ultimate why is, right? And like, if I had all the money in the world, what is it that I would do? And I think that what I would do is I would spend all of my waking hours just connecting people with other people that can make their lives better, or even just sharing whatever it is that I know that can help somebody improve their lives and make them happier. Um, and I think that that's what I would leave the audience with is like talking to everybody doesn't just apply to talking to new people,
Hmm.
but it also applies to talking to people that you already know, so like making sure that you're telling people in your family that you love them, making sure that you're telling your friends, like checking in on them. A lot of people that are in my inner circle, they get random texts from me all the time, or random, messages on Instagram all the time about how are you doing? How's this, how's that? Merry Christmas to you and your family, anything under the sun, happy birthday, hope all is well. And I don't say that because I want something from them. I say that because I genuinely care about how them and their family are doing. And even though we're young, just even us in our own lifetime already have lost a lot of people that we graduated high school with,
Yeah.
and a lot of people that we went to high school with. Just the other day, someone that I played football with as a kid passed away.
I'm so
And
sorry.
yeah, I mean, the thing is like, we only have so much time on this earth. And even though time is one of those things that goes long and goes slow at the same time, um, the worst thing imaginable is to be sitting on your deathbed thinking that you could have done more, or that you could have been somebody more.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I like to think of, or how I like to conceptualize life and the end of it, is that on the day that you die, the person that you are is going to meet the person that you could have become.
Hmm.
And it's pretty powerful, because if that person that you could become is pretty powerful, that's the highest potential of yourself.
Hmm.
And the worst thing is to be on your deathbed and recognizing that there's a big gap between those two and not having the ability to do anything about it. So I think that the people that are listening, especially if you're younger, even if it doesn't matter what age you are, because it's always better late than never,
Hmm.
is make sure that you're actually living your life and that you genuinely care about the others around you, because we don't know when we're going to leave. We don't know when the people around us are going to leave, but we know that we are at some point. And that's what I would leave, is just love people and be happy, man.
No, for
There's
sure.
there's no reason to do anything else.
I love the one point you made about how, like, even if it's not even for yourself, like I know sometimes where I've reached out to somebody to connect them with someone else, and I had nothing to do with it.
Absolutely.
Like, it's
Yeah.
literally, hey Carson, I know so and so. I know that, like, I can't do anything to help the person at that point of wherever they are if they're having any issues, but I know somebody who can.
Yeah.
Hey Carson, this is so and so. Or even if, like, I go to a new city and, like, I know two people who live in the city but they don't know each other, but I'm the mutual
Yeah.
connect. I've connected people like that, and I took a step back saying, hey, what they do after this is on them, but I hope they actually do something at that point.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, life is better when you're connected. And that being said, to anybody listening, if they wanted to get into contact with me, I respond to every single DM. I respond to every single comment that I get. Granted, I don't have as many followers as someone like Gary Vaynerchuk does, but
sure.
I want to be in the position in my life where I can help people however I can. So anybody listening, whether we know each other or not, whether we've talked to each other in 7 years or talked to each other yesterday, If there's something that you think that I can help you with, please reach out to me, and I'll do whatever I can to help you. And I sincerely
100%. I couldn't agree anymore. And I think that's one of the biggest things that actually needs to come, that more people should be doing, is be
yeah
willing to listen if someone messages you, or even approaches you. Like be open to people approaching you. Be open to people sending you messages saying, "Hey, I would like to talk about X, Y, and Z." But
yeah
I definitely will link in description for Carson's Instagram page or wherever you would
yeah
want to reach out to him. But as I close out, congrats on starting your own,
thank you
taking that step into starting your own company a few months ago.
thank you
Um, it has been amazing catching up with you.
likewise.
As always, guys, thank you all for listening. Thank you to the people who are actually going to listen to this and so far. But as always, please like, share, subscribe. And Carson, we will keep in touch. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Kunal. It's been an absolute pleasure, and keep crushing it out there.
Thank you all for listening again. Thank you, Carson, for being on my show, and we will keep in touch. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, but thank you so much.